Hey, if you would turn to 2 Samuel, 2 Samuel chapter 4. Choir, that was exceptionally good. So in between the weeks of Mother's Day and Father's Day, we're doing this series, we're calling it Family Matters. And I asked Pastor Brian this week, I said, hey, Family Matters, is it like, hey, Family Matters? Or is it like, let's talk about some family matters? And his answer was, yes. So, however you want to take it, you can take it that way, double entendre, I suppose. So, Family Matters is what we're talking about this morning. And so the idea is that we're just kind of discussing the felt needs of just about every single family, particularly families in America. We're talking about the brokenness that is within every single family, even the families in this church. But we're talking also about how the gospel is the solution to your family problems, to your family brokenness. So last week, Pastor Brian, he discussed the difficulty of being authentic and how difficult it is to be even real with your kids. But he also talked about what a blessing it is to be real with your kids. And so I think last week could be summarized just kind of in this statement. We are messed up, and we are going to mess up our kids. But the best thing we can do for them is to show them that we can face our demons. You and I, we're broken people, and we give birth to broken people, and we're going to mess them up. But the good news is, the best thing we can do for them is that we can show them you can face your demons. You can face this brokenness and deal with it in a way that the kids can see that this doesn't have to be the master of our life. So this week, I want to approach the topic from the other end. So Pastor Brian talked about, hey, parents, be real with your kids, but not everyone in the room has had kids. However, everyone in the room has had parents. I mean, everyone, I think, alive has had at least two people who were involved in creating you. And so everyone has parents in here. So I kind of want to talk about it from the other end. As kids, we are the children of broken people. And we have inherited this depravity from our parents. In fact, the Bible even says that generations pass on their sinfulness. And so we have inherited our sinfulness from our parents. So the good news is, like, the next time you sin, you can just blame it on your parents. I do it all the time. It's really an effective way of getting out of trouble, right? I mean, just blame it on your parents because you got it from them, right? So Jessica and I, we're excited to find out the gender of our baby in a few weeks. We don't know if it's a boy or girl yet. And really kind of what I'm excited about is to see, like, what features do we pass on to our kid? Like, what characteristics is that child going to get from us? Hopefully, I pray to the Lord that the child gets her good looks, of course. And I also pray to the Lord that he does not get, or she does not get, my IQ. So what I'm hoping is just for, like, the perfect baby. I know some high expectations, but I know that baby's going to be perfect to me, man. What I really do hope is that they get some of my nerdiness, because I really need a buddy who I can, like, geek out about Star Wars with. Like, I look forward to the day when I can be with my kid the moment they find out Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father. That's a moment I'm looking forward to as a father. Did I just spoil it for anyone? I'm sorry if you're like, what? No. So, so here's the thing, okay? We pass down these features, these characteristics to our children. And so I was afraid for a while, like, when we found out we're going to have a baby, there's that initial, like, woohoo, but then I'm like, oh no, I'm going to mess this kid up so bad. Like they're going to be a mess, like this child. Oh, please, Lord, make them like their mother. So I kind of had this fear come in, and then I was talking with someone, they're like, well, listen, James, you know you're going to mess them up. Like we're all depraved human beings here. We pass on our depravity to our kids and the kids' kids. And so what I would encourage you is with the advice that was given me, okay? We're all going to mess up our kids, but we can show them that we can face our demons. Now, we've inherited this sin nature, but I would also say that we, as the children of our parents, we also inherit, I believe, specific sin struggles. So it's not just like sin nature in general, but I believe even from parents to the kids, I believe that there are specific sin struggles that are passed down. For instance, it would be typical if the parent idolizes sports, the kid will idolize sports. If the parent idolizes money, the kid will idolize money. I believe that it is this specific struggle that's passed down. In fact, there are studies shown that in 1998, there was an article published in the ArchGen Psychiatry magazine that looked at 231 people who were diagnosed with drug or alcohol addiction and compared them to a group of people who did not have an addiction. Then that study looked at the first-degree relatives, such as parents, siblings, and children of those people, and it discovered that if a parent has a drug or an alcohol addiction, the child had an 8 times greater chance of developing an addiction. So, what we see even in the world of psychology all around us, we see, like, don't we say, like, oh, they're a spitting image of their parent. Like, I always say it with Vance and Pastor Brian. Like, if you look at Vance, you're like, this is a mini Pastor Brian. Like, this kid is just like, but it's more than physical features. It's the characteristics and personality, and even more, I think, specific sin struggles. If you consider your family, do you see that true in your case? So, this is also a biblical idea, I think. The Bible says that sins are passed down from the fathers to the children's children, and the children's children's children. It's just like this cycle of depravity. In fact, we get some like real-life examples from certain people in the Bible. For instance, let's consider some of the bigger-known Bible characters. Abraham, right? Abraham had some extreme favoritism going on with his kids. Didn't he favor Isaac over Ishmael? To the point where he even agreed to just like send Ishmael away, and as much as he knew, it would be sending him away to his death. But the Bible says how he idolized Isaac. He loved Isaac so much. He had this favoritism showing. Now what about Isaac? Didn't Isaac show favoritism? The Bible says that Isaac loved Esau even more than he loved his twin brother, Jacob. And so Isaac is showing favoritism to one of his kids as well. Well, what about Jacob? Didn't Jacob show favoritism to Joseph? Gave him the coat of many colors. He favored him over the other brothers. And then that transferred over to Benjamin. So he favored Benjamin over the other brothers. We see this sin being passed down from father to son to grandson to great-grandson and so on. It's this cycle of sin that we see being passed down through generations. So for us, what is it that runs through your family? I think we all know our sin that runs through the family. Like you often hear sometimes, well, my family, we're just hot-headed. We're just a hot-headed family, and that's just kind of how we are. That's who we are. And we kind of oftentimes like sweep things under the rug as if it's not a big deal, but it's like, no, that's just a sin that you inherited of a lack of mercy. And so think of with your family, what could it be? Maybe it would be abandonment. Maybe it would be a withdrawal and an isolation. Maybe it would be like the smothering and control. Whatever it might be, I think that sin is oftentimes passed down. Now, there's a story in the Bible that I think is just absolutely beautiful. And sadly, I don't think it's taught as much, and it's not as well known. But this story, I think, it depicts the gospel in such a crystal clear way, and it shows for us this matter of inherited depravity. It shows us the struggle of sin running through a family, but it also shows how the gospel is the solution. I love this story. It's the story of David and Mephibosheth. I taught the lesson to the teenagers a couple of weeks ago, and I just thought, man, this just fits so perfectly into this Family Matters series that I think, man, I want everyone to hear this story because it's such a beautiful, good story. So it's a story that it reveals the typical cycle of sin being passed down the generations, but it also shows that this cycle can be broken. That's the good news. That God's grace can break the cycle of sin. I told you, Abraham and then Isaac and then Jacob. Joseph broke the cycle. Joseph didn't give in to that favoritism gene, or whatever you want to call it, that he inherited. He had 2 sons that he loved equally and took care of them both. He loved them both. Joseph broke the cycle. We can break this cycle that we are plagued with from our families, that we've inherited from our parents. Now, listen, I wish we could take time to go through everyone's story of their parents and of their family and what kind of family you came from. But let it just be known that, there is incredible diversity of families in this room, okay? Single parents or two parents or two sets of parents with both married again or raised by grandparents. There's just incredible diversity throughout this room of how you grew up. And so I want to first note that I recognize that, but that doesn't change anything that you hear from this, okay? It doesn't matter what family you've come from. It doesn't matter what your lineage is. The gospel is powerful enough to break this cycle that has been plaguing your family. So let's kind of get into this. And this whole story, this clear image of the gospel is about how God's grace can not necessarily eradicate your sin nature right now, but it can begin correcting that sin nature that you have inherited from your family. So let me kind of set up the story for you, okay? Here's how it begins. King Saul and his son Jonathan have died in battle. They were fighting the Philistines. Israel went on retreat. The Philistines pursued. And as the Philistines were giving chase, they were killing the Israelite soldiers on the run. Eventually, they caught Jonathan, the prince of Israel, and they kill him. But Saul continues on the run. He actually takes a couple arrows in the back and continues running. But eventually, he kind of realizes he's not going to make it out of this alive. The Philistines are going to catch him. And so what he does is he commits suicide so that the Philistines wouldn't have the honor of killing him. So King Saul and Jonathan are dead. Now, word is kind of making its way back, and it's the middle of the night when word reaches the royal palace that King Saul and his son Jonathan have died. And so as the servants and the family are waking up to this news, there is sorrow, but there is also dread that begins stirring in the palace. Because custom was that if a leader was defeated in battle, they would kill his entire family so that there wouldn't be an heir to the throne from that line. And so there's a dread stirring in the royal palace. King Saul has died. Jonathan has died as well. Now, King Saul had another son. His name was Ishbosheth. And Ishbosheth was a cruel man, and the palace family knew it. And so they knew certainly Ishbosheth would come in and wipe out the family so that he could take the throne. And so sure enough, in the middle of the night, as the servants and family are grieving together, they hear the voices of soldiers approaching the palace. And they did what we all would have done. They fled. And so they start scattering out of the palace into the dead of night. One servant girl scooped up a 5-year-old boy named Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, and fled the palace. They knew he would be a target of Ishbosheth, that Ishbosheth would want to kill Jonathan's children so that there would be no heir, so that he could have the throne. And so this servant girl flees with 5-year-old Mephibosheth in her arms. She runs into the dark of the night, and she makes way for the nearest cover, some trees. And as she's running there, she believes she's in the clear, that there's no one that knows where she is. She trips on a root. Mephibosheth tumbles. She falls. And in this fall, Mephibosheth's back is broken, and he is paralyzed. She scoops the boy back up. He's not able to run for himself, and she continues fleeing for his life and for her life. Ishbosheth takes the throne, and we don't really hear a whole lot. Look at 2 Samuel chapter 4, verse 4. And Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son that was lame of his feet. He was 5 years old when the tidings came of Saul and Jonathan out of Jezreel. And his nurse took him up and fled. And it came to pass, as she made haste to flee, that he fell and became lame. And his name was Mephibosheth. That's all we hear. He gets one verse right there. He gets one verse. And then chapter 4 is just about how Ishbosheth takes over, about how he sets his rule. And we're kind of left just like with the rest of the story of Ishbosheth. The cruel man takes over as king, and you're kind of just like, okay, what was the point of Mephibosheth even being in the story? What we do know is now at this point, chaos is the theme of the royal family. There's just absolute chaos. The patriarch Saul is dead. Jonathan and 2 more brothers have died. Ishbosheth, the cruel one, is trying to kill off the rest of the family so that he can have the throne. However, Ishbosheth is also trying to kill David because David was the anointed and prophesied one to be king after Saul. And so Ishbosheth wants to get rid of God's man to kill him off so that he can finally have a secured throne. Now what we have is this large group of Israelites who are following David, and they believe David is indeed the anointed one. He should be the king. But then we've got all this group of people over here who believe, no, Ishbosheth is the rightful heir because he's the son of Saul, so he should be king. And so you've kind of got Israel beginning to split almost into 2 kingdoms at this point. Some who are following David, some who are following Ishbosheth, and we have this chaos in the royal family. And so for years, Ishbosheth is trying to kill David. David makes a vow that he will not harm Ishbosheth for the sake of his family. He believes he's not going to kill a man who's been put in authority. He's not going to kill the brother of his best friend, Jonathan. And so David vows he's not going to take out Ishbosheth. He's going to let God deal with this. All the while, Ishbosheth is crazed to kill David. So years pass, chapter 4 ends, and we're left wondering, what was that bit about that lame boy, Mephibosheth? Some 5-year-old boy. Why was it important to put a 5-year-old boy who's lame in the feet in the Bible in just one verse? So you're kind of left wondering these things until we get word in a few chapters later that an assassin has killed Ishbosheth. An insider in the palace has killed Ishbosheth in his sleep. And that assassin runs back to David and says, David, I took care of your enemy. I killed Ishbosheth. David is grieved at this news. He says, no, I vowed I would never kill him. Why would you come saying this like it's good news to me? This was family of my best friend, Jonathan. And so he ordered for that assassin to be killed for killing the king. So David becomes king at this point. He takes the throne, and he gets lost in his responsibilities as king. Years go by again. More and more time has gone by since Ishbosheth was king, and then David was king until 2 Samuel chapter 9. If you got your Bible, go ahead and turn there. I would love for you to see where this story is headed. Let's read verses 1 through 5. And David said, Is there yet any that is left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? Now, David's been king for several years, and one day it just dawns on him, man, I made this covenant with Jonathan that I would take care of his family. So it just kind of dawns on him one day. He begins to wonder, is there any family left of Jonathan or Saul that I could take care of them? And there was of the house of Saul a servant whose name was Ziba. And when they had called him unto David, the king said unto him, Art thou Ziba? And he said, Thy servant is he, yes. And the king said, Is there not yet any of the house of Saul that I may show the kindness of God unto him? And Ziba said unto the king, Jonathan hath yet a son, which is lame on his feet. And the king said unto him, Where is he? And Ziba said unto the king, Behold, he's in the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, in Lodabar. Then King David sent and fetched him out of the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, from Lodabar. So what we've got here is David summons Mephibosheth. Now, Mephibosheth is from the land of Lodabar. That's important because Lodabar literally means land of nothing. So David hears that there's this lame son of Jonathan living in the land of nothing, and he calls him. Now, Mephibosheth, he's paralyzed by his fall, lost his family, living in isolation in this land of nothing, is summoned by the king out of nowhere. Look at verses 6 through 8. Now when Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, was come unto David, he fell on his face and did reverence. And David said, Mephibosheth. And he answered, Behold thy servant. And David said unto him, Fear not, for I will surely show thee kindness for Jonathan thy father's sake, and will restore thee all the land of Saul thy father, and thou shalt eat bread at my table continually. And he bowed himself and said, What is thy servant that thou shouldest look upon such a dead dog as I am? It's a pretty low view of himself to call him a dead dog. So he had lost his ability to walk. He had lost his inheritance. He had lost his family. He's living in the land of nothing. He's an utterly broken man. An utterly broken man. And there's something else to remember, okay? This is the grandson of King Saul. King Saul, on two separate occasions, while David was in the palace playing his harp for Saul, hurls a javelin at David, trying to pin him to the wall. It says Saul wanted to pin him to the wall. That's kind of intense. And so David goes on the run, and for years, Saul gives chase. For years, Saul has tried to kill David. And so David is reduced to living in caves. He runs to city, but every city he runs to, King Saul comes and wipes out the city. I mean, this is a crazed madman driven by his greed and by his power, by his insecurity and his pride, driven to kill off all these people in pursuit of killing David. There was a time when David and Saul, they had it good, but as David began to develop and find favor in the people's eyes, Saul got jealous, and from there, it was never a good relationship. It seems Saul passed that on. It seems that Saul gave that to his son Ishbosheth, and now Ishbosheth has gone on trying to kill David. Even while he reigned, he tried to murder this anointed man of God who was supposed to actually be on the throne. And so Ishbosheth goes in pursuit of David. And so now what we have is Mephibosheth comes here, and he's like, I'm coming from a broken family. You had two of my family members trying to kill you, one of them trying to kill me too. Like, he doesn't know what to expect, so he comes and he's falling on his face, and he says, Behold your servant, I'm just a dead dog. What would you want to have anything to do with me for? So this is a broken man. So there's this sin running through the family. We're seeing a pattern develop in the family. And Mephibosheth is fearing for his life, and it causes him to give pause and to hesitate when he comes before the king. But look at verses 9 through 13. When Joab saw that the front of the battle was against him, I'm reading chapter 10. Then the king called to Ziba, Saul's servant, and said unto him, I have given unto thy master's son all that pertained to Saul and to all his house. Thou therefore and thy sons and thy servants shalt till the land for him, and thou shalt bring in the fruits, that thy master's son may have food to eat. But Mephibosheth, thy master's son, shall eat bread always at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then said Ziba unto the king, According to all that my lord the king hath commanded his servant, so shall thy servant do. As for Mephibosheth, said the king, he shall eat at my table as one of the king's sons. And Mephibosheth had a young son, whose name was Micah, and all that dwelt in the house of Ziba were servants unto Mephibosheth. So Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem, for he did eat continually at the king's table, and was lame on both his feet. So what we're seeing here is David makes a vow, and this is really in honor of a covenant he had made with Mephibosheth's father, Jonathan, to take care of his family. And so David vows to take care of Mephibosheth, to treat him well, and so that he would always eat at his table. So here's kind of the gospel in all of this story. This is kind of resolving in a nice way, but I told you it reflected the gospel, so let me just show you first and foremost. We are all broken by a fall. We all are represented in Mephibosheth, in that there has been a fall that has left us broken, essentially paralyzed, unable to help ourselves, unable for us to even come to the king when he has summoned us. We've all been broken by a fall, and that fall was sin. The original fall of Adam has been passed down to all of his children, us. So that fall from Adam has brought about brokenness, and that brokenness is passed on to all of us. But we were in Adam when he fell, so we have fallen, and we are now broken by that sin. But, like Mephibosheth, we've been summoned by the king. We have been called into the royal courts here. And so we're carried in just as Mephibosheth was. And he brings us to his table. He brings us, this is so cool. Okay, so this table is a position of royalty. There are only two types of people who would sit at the king's table: the king's family and his guests. Now, King David is very clear on which one Mephibosheth is. He says, he will sit at my table as my son. He is essentially saying, I'm now adopting Mephibosheth, and everyone in here will consider him my child. This boy will now forever sit at my table as my son, and he will eat with me for the rest of his days. So, this is so cool. Mephibosheth has a new father. He's beginning to learn a new way of life. What he inherited from his family originally, this depravity, is now being replaced with this new grace from his new father. And he's learning a new way of life from his new adopted father. And so we, as Christians, as we have inherited our depravity from our family and our parents, when we've been adopted by God the Father, we begin learning his new ways of grace and mercy and love. He sits us at his table as his child to show us his way of life. What a beautiful picture of God's redeeming love. I don't know about you guys. Man, I grew up with my family. I loved our family dinners. I loved whenever my mom or my dad, they declared it, this is a family night. And so we would gather on the table, and it's me and two other brothers. It was never like a peaceful dinner. I mean, usually there was either arguments or like we were like the best of friends. There was no in between. It's like either I hate you or I love you so much. So I love these family dinners. And usually, like, my dad, he would, like, cook, like, some Italian, and he would put on some Andrea Bocelli music, and we would sit there and sing with the songs. And we just loved our family dinners. And so we would gather around the table. Sometimes it would be like a movie night, and so we would gather in the living room and watch a movie. But usually it was just dinner at the table. And so we would come in, and we would sit at this table. We all usually had a place where we would sit. And Mom always wanted to ask the question, what did you learn today? How was your day? You know, like, tell me what's going on in your life. And, of course, our answers were just like, meh. And we just, that was usually our answers to those questions. But I look back on that time, and I love them. Now, it says that Mephibosheth was sitting at David's table as his son. Now, here's the thing. I don't know how your family does it. But when you're sitting at a table, okay, as I'm sitting here enjoying my meal, I'm not looking at my feet. What I am looking at is the feast spread out on the table. As long as I'm sitting at this table, all I'm focused on is what's on the table. As long as Mephibosheth was sitting at the king's table, check it out, y'all, he wasn't looking at his brokenness. When he was at this table of grace that the king had invited him to, no longer was he Mephibosheth, the boy who was lame in his feet. He was Mephibosheth, the adopted son of a king. And all that he could see was the king sitting with him and this feast of grace spread before him. When you come to the table of grace, God's not looking at your faults. He's not looking at your brokenness or your sin. He's not consumed with how you've been labeled as the broken son of so-and-so. No, what he sees is an adopted child that he just wants to enjoy a meal with. He's looking at someone that he wants to spend some time with. He doesn't see your sins. And while you sit at this table and while you enjoy Him, you're not consumed by the sins either. You're not consumed with your brokenness. You're not making excuses for how you've inherited what you have. You're enjoying a meal with your new Father, with your adopted Father, who's showing you His way. This is so profound, y'all. For Mephibosheth, what he probably inherited was probably fear. It's what you see in Saul. It's what you see in Ishbosheth. He probably inherited like this tendency to just like get so insecure that he would lash out in anger. I'm guessing that's probably something that he inherited from his family. But when he comes to the table of grace, that didn't matter anymore. He had a new Father teaching him his new ways of grace and love and mercy. It doesn't matter if where you came from, your father was just always an angry man. It doesn't matter that if where you came from, all that you got was shame and guilt into this behavior modification. It doesn't matter that if where you came from was all about this vanity of appearance. I know that's what you've inherited as a sin nature, but your new Father, your adopted Father, wants to teach you something new. He wants to teach you a new way, a way that's not of the spirit of fear and insecurity, not of anger and rage, not as of abuse or neglect, of smothering or avoiding. He's teaching you a new way, His way,